da, 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 da. Anybody know what that theme song's from? I Dream of Jeannie. Right, and I admit that when I was reading through this gospel, that theme song kept running through my head. If you get past the humor and the mistakes that make it a sitcom, the actual idea of the show, I Dream of Jeannie, is one that appeals to most of us. Having someone to just show up and grant any wish or desire we may want. Now that's my idea of a servant. Which is why that song pops into my head when I think of today's gospel. Because the first words out of James and John's mouth are those of a master to a genie, even if it's veiled in politeness. Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. It is the height of arrogance or ignorance. I'm not sure which. Now, to place this in a little context for you, James and John, in a very short time before this event, have A, witnessed the transfiguration when Moses and Elijah appeared on the sides of Jesus. B, have seen Jesus heal someone of their blindness. C, have seen Peter declare Jesus as Son of God. D, argued about who was the greatest. And E, heard Jesus 2 times explain that his purpose is to be handed over, to be tortured and die for the sake of the kingdom. And what they have taken away from these 5 examples is that it would be really cool to sit next to Jesus in his glory. Really? So they take this Son of Man, Son of God, who will take up his cross and die for them, and they turn him into a person to grant their wishes. They hear the word servant, and they think of someone who is beneath them, who is there to do what they want, who has no will of his own, yet somehow still worthy to sit next to, because he's extra nice and will do anything they ask. In other words, yes, Jesus, we believe you're the Messiah, but a spineless one. The servant who likes to give them what they want, when they want, and how they want it. Boy, are they wrong. But you can't really blame them. What do you think of when you hear the word servant? We've been given lots of images of servants through the books we read, the movies we watch, the TV series that are on. If you've ever watched any British series like Upstairs, Downstairs, or Downton Abbey, you picture servants as ignored or mistreated, calculating or having far more knowledge than they should. Or perhaps a servant is a little bit closer to a genie in your mind, popping up whenever you need them, proclaiming, "What can I do for you?" Or we may equate the servant with shows like Give Me a Break, Mr. Belvedere, Different Strokes, this wise, cracking part of the family who offers sage advice and is outspoken in a household of chaos. Sometimes we equate servant with the word slave, someone who has no choice in the serving, forced and unwilling, doing only what they do out of fear of punishment. In almost any case, a servant is hired, paid, or fired at the whim of the master. Most of us would not willingly choose to be a servant, even bristling when people we like ask us to help without pay or acknowledgement. Oh, we're willing to serve, sometimes for the right occasion, like our upcoming dinner, but we must admit it will exhaust us, and we certainly would not want to do it every day. So when we hear Jesus tell us that he came to serve us, it makes us a little happy. We have someone else to do the work, to grant us what we want, to be the one to speak up when we don't want to. Let's be honest, we have all been James and John, telling Jesus to do for us whatever we ask, and forgetting to ask what we could do for him. It had to be frustrating for Jesus to be surrounded by people who continually don't get it. If this section of Mark, Jesus has proclaimed rightly that Peter has called him the Son of God, only to have to then rebuke him for trying to grasp at earthly power. Jesus has the opportunity to tell of his coming glory in his death and resurrection, only to have the disciples argue amongst themselves who is the greatest of them. And finally, he speaks again of his death to save the world, only to have James and John turn around and ask to be honored. No wonder his answer sounds harsh. Are you crazy? Can you face the torture and the death that it will take to cleanse the people from their sin? And James and John replied, yeah. Really? They don't have to think about that one at all? Really, they aren't thinking at all. Their minds are so focused on the idea of glory that they aren't paying attention to what it means to be right next to Jesus. Jesus has come to serve, not like a genie or a 19th century butler or a fun-loving paid housekeeper. He came to be a true servant, one who is in service at all times to another. His life centers around another, his Father, and, well, several others, namely us. He came to serve us, not in a bow and scrape and grant whatever we want way. He saw in the people what they needed, and he gave it to them willingly, even when they didn't seem to find it all that helpful, like the disciples, like the Pharisees, like we don't sometimes. Jesus was strong when others wanted to force him to do something he knew was not what God wanted. But he was also weak and vulnerable to those who had never known respect or dignity. He served those who others would never see worthy of the effort. He tells James and John that to be with him is not to give up who they are, but to be all that they were meant to be in God in order to help those around them. He tells them they are able to drink his cup and be baptized in fire as he was, but it will not lead to the glory they are looking for. For to be at the right and the left of Christ is to be the least glorified there is, as we will be shown on the cross, as a criminal sit on his left and his right, begging for his mercy. For Jesus' glory is his willingness to die. And those closest to him will suffer as well. And while they will know glory, it will not be here. Are we able to drink that cup, to share in that baptism? Yes, Jesus tells us that we are and that we do. Through Christ's sacrifice on the cross, we are made glorious. Not in the ways the world would seek glory, but in the fact that we approach life knowing that we are freed from our sin and granted life eternal. Christ served us in the one and only way we truly needed. He gave his life so that we might live. And in doing so, he freed us to be servants to one another. Our cups and our baptisms will not be saving humanity like Jesus, And they may not be martyrdom for the glory of the gospel like James and John, but they must be reflected in our words and our actions because God changes us. He has given us his blood and his body. In his great love for us and his generosity to us, he has given us all that we need to be able to serve one another, even when we don't like or understand the other. As Isaiah proclaims this morning, it is by his bruises that we are healed. In Christ we can serve because we have been served. We can love because we have been and always will be loved.